Hey everybody, today I'm taking a look at 5 board games that despite being old are still fantastic. So even though there's tons and tons of board games being released year after year, these ones still hold their own in the marketplace and deserve to be hitting your table. But before I get started on the games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer when it comes to purchasing board games here in the UK. And if you use my link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. Okay, so I'm going to start here with the most recent of the games, despite being 22 years old. This is Vabank by Leo Colavini and Bruno Feduti. So this is a 3 to 6 player bluffing game that takes around 45 minutes to play. And the idea of this game is you're trying to collect the most money, of course. And you're going to do that by allocating these poker chips to these different kind of betting tables. And once that's done and that money is distributed by all the players, then you're going to start allocating these cards down. And these cards are going to come in 3 different types. You have straight up bluffing cards that do nothing. You have these double cards, which will double the value of a table. And you also have these trap cards, and they can combine with each other. So you can get a double and a trap card on a single table. But because all these cards are being allocated face down, you obviously don't know what the other people are going for. And you have to kind of use a bit of deduction and use some mind games into thinking what other people are going to be doing. And once the money and the cards have been allocated, you are going to be moving your pawns around the table in a clockwise method and landing on certain tables. And then once everyone's moved their pieces, everything's going to be revealed and the money will be distributed accordingly. But of course, if you trap someone, you are going to take that money instead of the person on the actual table. So there's a lot of mind games here, and this game fits a very nice kind of niche where it's still very accessible and obviously scalable, going up to 6 players, but it's not a strict party game. You know, there's nothing really throwaway. You can actually get quite invested in this game, and it is quite an engaging experience considering how light, accessible, and versatile it is in terms of its player count. So definitely one of the strongest bluffing games I've ever played. It's such a fun experience. It gets to the table regularly when they have that high player count, and I think this game has one of the best uses of player turn order that I've ever seen, because if you are winning the game by having tons of money, then you are going to be leading the next round in terms of moving your pawn, meaning that you are going to give a bit more information away to the other players, because if you're going to a really rich table and you have a card there, it might just be a double card and people might follow suit there, but of course you could be double bluffing and trapping them. So always trying to think ahead. Yes, you have to be prepared to roll with the punches here. You can get massively smashed in this game because, you could keep getting trapped through no fault of your own, and sometimes it might not work out for you. But hey, it's such a fun and ruckus experience that I absolutely love. And sadly, it just slipped outside of my top 100, but it goes to show how much I like it when it's just outside my top 100 games of all time. So that is Vabank, a fantastic bluffing game. Next up, we have Lost Cities. So this is considered, and I personally consider it, one of the pillars of forefathers of the 2-player only genre of games. This is by Dr. Rainer Knizia, that came out kind of at the turn of the millennium, really, 1999, 2000, that kind of era. But this is almost like a tug of war style hand management and card game, as you are trying to build runs of these cards in front of you in these columns, going from low to high, but you can have gaps in between them. You don't have to have every single card. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to create points by doing that. However, as soon as you start a run of cards, then you're going to automatically start with a negative deficit of 20 points. So you're going to have to start chipping away at that negative deficit by playing these cards and hopefully get into positives. But there are several twists on this game, because you can play these handshake cards, which will double the value of your points. But if you don't reach that 20-point threshold, then they're going to score double negative points, or even triple negative points if you play more than one handshake. And because you're sharing a pool of cards with your opponent, that can become very tight, because you might need some cards that are in your opponent's hands. You have this cool kind of discard pile mechanism here, as you can play cards to discard them from your hand onto the communal board, which makes them available for your opponents to take and maybe even use against you. Your hand limit is really tight in this game, and everything you do feels excruciating and meaningful. There are so many games that this game has inspired, and games that are in my personal collection, games like Photograph or games like Trombone, and this one still holds its own. You get that pure tension of, when am I going to get invested? Am I going to bite the bullet and go for this one and go for all out? Well, I'm going to avoid that one because I can't quite meet or can't quite break in to the positive points. Just a great game. It holds up really well. Despite being so many great two-player games out there, this is still right up there for me. And probably maybe might even be in my top 10 two-player games still. So that's Lost Cities, still a fantastic game. Next up, we have Sid Sackson's Cant Stop. Now, this is a 2 to 4 player push your luck game that takes around 30 minutes to play. Now, in this game, it couldn't really be more simple. You are simply trying to climb to the pinnacle of 3 of these tracks. You can see these tracks are numbered from 2 to 12, which are the variables in terms of what you can roll on a pair of dice. And you can see here that the extremities, the 2s and the 12s, which are of course much harder to roll, you only need to climb 3 steps, where the 7, which is the most common, you have to climb quite a few more steps. And all you're doing is you're rolling these dice. You can have up to 3 going at any time, but as soon as you roll a combination that you cannot allocate to one of those numbers, you are going to go bust, and you're going to fall back to your latest kind of saved point, because you can either keep pushing or you can stop and reserve your space ready for the next round. But of course that puts you under pressure because other people are sharing the same spots as you, and if they overtake you and reach the top before you do, then you are going to get kicked off that particular column and going to have to go somewhere else. So it does have this real cool visceral tension. You know, one more roll, shall I do it, shall I not, shall I save my space, or am I willing to risk it all? There's some great laugh out loud moments with this game. It does a great job of bringing that push your luck kind of feeling to the forefront of the game experience and doesn't convolute it at all. So I actually think this is a really good push your luck game. Now, my only issue with it is that the kind of engagement of the other players when it's not their turn isn't too strong. So sometimes, you know, especially if you're playing a 4-player game, it might feel like you can kind of lose a bit of interest, or, you know, lose a bit of engagement if it's not your turn, because if somebody's having a really good turn and rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling, you'll just sit there twiddling your thumbs. But despite that minor criticism, I actually think the game is a lot of fun. You know, I've had a good games with this one, and it's one of those games that I never really would turn down because it is so visceral and so enjoyable. So that is Cant Stop. Next up, we have Sleuth, another game by Sid Sackson. Now, this is a 3 to 7 player deduction game as you are trying to work out which of these cards has been taken out of the deck. And these cards are going to come in different variables. You've got solitaires, you've got doubles, and you've got these triples, as well as having the 3 different gem types. You've got the diamonds, opals, pearls, as well as having 4 different colours. You can see there's tons of variables there, and the way that you deduce which card is missing is by asking questions to the other players using these question cards. So I actually like the way in this game that you do not have pure freedom to ask what you want to the other players. You are restricted by what you have in your hand. Like, for example, you could say, how many green opals do you have? How many blue clusters do you have, which are these sets of 3s? How many pearls do you have? And so on. And you can learn things when it's not your turn. Kind of mapping everything out and trying to work out what people could physically have. It's just a really enjoyable and rich process. And it's definitely one of those games where when you actually solve the mystery and get it correct, it is just such a rewarding experience. So despite this one being, I believe, over 50 years old now, this for me is still up there, probably my top 2 deduction games, and it's probably the purest of the genre that I've played. It's pretty hard, it's very brain burnery and quite taxing in terms of, you know, making sure you get all your notes in order and not making any mistakes. And of course, like with most deduction games, it can be quite fragile if you make mistakes, but that's not a fault of the game really. If people are on the ball and doing the right things, asking the right questions, and everyone's jotting things down right, then the game is just phenomenal. So yeah, holds up so well. No kind of fat on this one at all. Definitely no excess rules that don't need to be there. It's just a really great experience. So that is Sleuth. And the final game I'm talking about today is Acquire. Despite this one being the oldest game on the list here, dating back to the 60s, this is the heaviest and most involved out of the 5. Now, this is a 2 to 6 player economic game that takes around 90 minutes to play on average. Now, the objective of this game is to make as much money as you can by investing in shares of these companies. Now, the board state of this game is really dynamic as you have this grid here, and turn after turn, more of these buildings are going to pop up. And as soon as they become, I believe it's size 2, they'll become a company. Now, inevitably, as the game develops, these companies are going to start colliding with each other, meaning that the larger companies will start swallowing up the smaller companies. But that can be a good thing for the major shareholders in the smaller companies because they'll get dividends. They can also have an opportunity to sell the stock of those companies. Or you can even choose to hold on to it, and hopefully these companies have a bit of a revitalization and come into play later. So I love the timing exercise here. You know, when is the best time to hold on to my stock? When should I get rid of it? And which company shall I invest in? Yes, it might be expensive now to invest in this company, but it's really on the upward trajectory. Therefore, my money might be worth, or those stocks and shares might be worth even more later. Such a simple and clean game in terms of the turn structure. Literally place a building down and then choose to invest in, I think it's up to 3 companies. And so many variables going on at all times. You need to consider a bunch of things. And you know what? This has become a bit of a standard bearer for me in terms of economic games, because I played quite a lot of heavy economic simulations, games that are taking 3-4 hours to play with tons of tracks and tons of things. And I always think they kind of pale in comparison to Acquire, because you can play like 3 games of Acquire and have just as rich of an experience as you can play with a lot of these kind of more involved shareholding games. But yeah, I really think this game holds up so well, considering this is like very old now. This is like 60 years old, which is quite astonishing because there aren't many economic games that are better than Acquire. And I would highly recommend this one if you like a minimalist stocks and shares games that is very accessible but still has those crunchy decisions and those timing exercises of when to hold on to things and when to get rid of them. Just a really cool game. So that is Acquire. So there we go, that concludes the video. It's been a pleasure talking about these classics with you and sharing my thoughts on them, because it's always nice to kind of show a bit of appreciation to the games that laid the path to a lot of these newer games coming out there, because often the older ones are just as good, if not better, than the new ones. If you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.